Welcome to The Art of Likeability, ranked one of the top podcasts in the world. In this podcast, you'll discover how to leverage likability to build stronger relationships, lead more efficiently, close more sales, and keep customers happy while increasing success in your professional and personal life. Let's jump in with your host, Arel Moody.
All right, what's going on, Likeability family? Arel Moody here, your host of the Art of Likeability podcast, where you learn incredible strategies to improve every area of your life. You are going to be like the Michael Jordan of charisma, likability. Unless you don't like Michael Jordan, then you'll be the Tom Brady. If you don't like Tom Brady, just fill in the blank with someone you actually like who's at the top of their game, and you will be there, okay? And today we have a very, 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 very special guest that's going to help you get control of your time. And what's so valuable about time is that it's the resource that no matter how much you make, you can't get more of it. So the utilization of our time is so crucial. And I want to tell you a little bit about our guest today and why she is the expert and why she's someone who I just admire for so many years for the work that she does. So let me tell you about Elizabeth Grace Saunders. She's an internationally recognized expert on effective time management and is the founder of Real Life Time Coaching and Speaking. So her company partners with individuals on the journey from feeling guilty, overwhelmed, and frustrated to feeling peaceful, confident, and accomplished through one-on-one coaching and divine time management group coaching program. She's been featured on CBS, ABC, NBC, Fox. She's a contributor to Forbes, Harvard Business Review, Huffington Post, Fast Company. She's a member of the Young Entrepreneur Council and the Forbes Coaches Council. She's been published through McGraw-Hill and the Harvard Business Review for her first two books. And her newest book is coming out, which is published by FaithWorks, and it's called Divine Time Management: The Joy of Trusting God's Loving Plans for You. So I am so excited to have on the one, the only, Elizabeth Grace Saunders. Elizabeth, thanks for being with our Likeability today.
My pleasure. I am delighted to be here. Thanks for that intro.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. So now listen, let's jump into a little bit about it, because I know a little bit about your background because I've been fortunate enough to know you and to work with you for some years now. And you kind of figured out this whole time coaching thing, but that always wasn't like your thing, you know? So tell us a little bit about like, what were you doing? And then what made you realize this time coaching is your thing?
Yeah, exactly. I'd be happy to share. And this process happened in the process of knowing you. So it's been fun that I've gotten to see the transition. So my first business was doing writing, editing, and photo styling for magazines and marketing companies. And I fell into that business. So I didn't have any sense of work-life balance. I was just excited I was making money, and I was working as much as possible to get the work done. And that was okay for the first couple of years. But after about 2 years of that, I was like, this is ridiculous. I never felt like I had a time when I could stop working without feeling guilty. And that included late at night, on the weekends. And I just decided enough was enough. I wanted balance. I wanted to feel successful in terms of being happy with my life, not just making money and doing cool work. And so I personally just started to balance out my life, not work at night, not work on the weekends, reduce my hours. And it was actually through meeting people like you, Arel, and other people that were on the Extreme Entrepreneurship Tour, which was a speaking tour we were both on at the time, that my entrepreneur friends said, Elizabeth, this is amazing. We have successful businesses, but we're stressed out all the time, and you should help others. And that was over 8.5 years ago. And since then, I've had the privilege of not only continuing to work on my own time management, but literally helping people all over the world, every single continent except Antarctica, get to a more peaceful, productive place.
You know what's so great about it too, and I can attest to this from real life experience. We would sit down and we when we were speaking on the tour together, we would say, all right, let's go over our meeting, let's figure it out. And Elizabeth would open up like her stuff, like her binders and her calendars. And I would look at it with like, I have never seen such organized, planned out, like when we knew exactly how long something would take, and I'm like, it's almost like she could predict the future. Cause like for me, when someone says, hey, Arel, how long is it going to take? I'm like, I don't know. How do I even figure it out? For her, it's like, oh, that's going to be 2 hours. So we need to transition for 5 minutes. We need to do this for 10 minutes. And I was like, how do you, so like her grasp of it was so just a head and shoulders above anyone I've witnessed. And I've got to meet some really incredible humans. And to see you transition to it was just the most, for me, when I see like vibrations, like things working, like it's supposed to be that, it just felt that for you. And you've decided to kind of not just have the skill set, but kind of break it down and really to kind of put it into a formulaic, almost paint by numbers kind of way that anyone can really do. So why don't you jump into like when you're starting to help people with their time management, what is it that you see are the biggest problems, the biggest challenges, the biggest commonalities of the people you work with?
Yeah. Say that if I had to say one word, it would be overwhelmed. So if I had to just describe it in one word, the clients I work with, they're overwhelmed. And how that manifests in their life typically takes one of two forms that seem opposite on the surface, even though underneath it's the exact same issue. So on the one end, you have people that are crazy busy. So working all hours of the day and night, usually not sleeping very well or not enough, not exercising, just constantly busy. Everything's crazy, overwhelming, and they feel like they're getting nothing done. And then on the other hand, you'll have individuals who are so overwhelmed that their response is that they shut down and they're paralyzed and they don't get anything done, and they're not busy. They're wasting time on the internet or, sitting on their couch or whatever that looks like. And so I'd say people in both circumstances are people that come to me. The first category really needs to figure out how to do less and really get clarity on what their priorities are and what to really needs to work on taking small steps to build their courage and build their momentum to really get stuff done. So those are probably the most common scenarios that people are in when they come to me.
Now, that concept probably sounds like the most counterintuitive thing that you could say to someone who's feeling overwhelmed. Like, I want you to do less so that you can do more. Tell me more about what that kind of looks like, because when you first hear it, it's like, yeah, do you want me to pay with things with magic dust and gold fairy? Like you're speaking fantasy world here. So like, how does that tangibly work?
Right. So it's obviously a multi-level process, and particularly when I work with people who are managers, so they have a lot of different people that they interact with that take their time. It really is the development of an ecosystem, and that's why those programs are typically 6 months long. But to start out, there's two basic levels that we want to assess things at. So there's the macro level and there's the micro level. So if you're someone that's really overwhelmed, and let's just say you're in the first category, so you're crazy busy, working all the time, all that stuff. One of the biggest things you need to do to start out is to assess your macro level time management. And that's about making the hard choices about what you're letting into your life. So for people, that could be maybe, am I in the right job? Am I running my business correctly? Is there maybe a part of my business that doesn't make sense for me? It's just driving me crazy. Or are there people that I need to hire, whether I'm an employee or a business owner, that might be able to take the load off? So those are a few of the professional decisions. Outside of work, it might be questions on the macro level, like, should I be serving on this board? Should I be the coach of my kids' soccer team? Should I volunteer in this particular way? Or maybe like, should I run this marathon? And just really looking at, okay, what are some of the big macro level things that have a massive impact on the direction of my time. And the reason why that is important is because there are certain situations that are literally impossible situations. And no matter how much you try to manage the micro better, you're not going to be able to fit you're not going to be able to fit it all in. And so you want to assess the macro level first. Then on the micro level, what you need to do is to really think day to day about what are your key priorities that you've narrowed down, and then radically focus in those areas. So for example, I have a new book coming out, which we'll talk about later. And there are certain things that are really nice things to do that right now, right before my book launch, I am choosing not to do because they're not the highest and best use of my time in this moment. So for example, let's say my email inbox. There are certain podcasts that I want to listen to, newsletters that I want to read, all of that are going into a folder to be looked at after the book launch because I need to be radically focused on this one thing that's most important to me. Or outside a hermit, but I'm really deciding on the micro level right now, this book launch is the top priority. And if I really want to invest in that, I need to make choices not to do some other things that would hinder it.
So when you're talking about the micro level, what I'm hearing you say is you first get a sense of, from a big picture, what are the things that are non-negotiables, right? Like if I have to be at a job, right? Like I have to be there from, say, 8 to 5 or whatever is the schedule that someone might have. So you go, okay, so I have to be at the job. I can't stop that. But on a macro level, what are the things I can control? What are things that you would consider that are macro level that people do have control over?
Well, sometimes, like I said, people really do actually need to switch jobs or switch their businesses. So for example, when I started my first business, I did writing, editing, and photo styling. And so I was offering multiple different sorts of things. And what photo styling means is basically you set up the sets for photo shoots. And it's really fun. It's really cool to do, but it's enormously time consuming. And there's a lot of risk involved, time risk, in the sense of you could try to order something to come in for a photo shoot and it might not arrive on time. Or this happened to me once. My editor wanted this one particular flower to be in a photo shoot, and I literally needed to call every florist in the city to find it. So I chose to shut down that part of my business and not offer it anymore because it was not serving my highest and best goals of being balanced. So as business owners, if you have multiple streams of income and there's certain parts of your business that just are, not working for you, you can decide to refocus. And it doesn't matter if people are coming to you asking you for it. If it's not working for you and it's stressing you out, you can decide not to do it. And then on the personal side, in terms of the choices you make, obviously, if you have a family, please be there for your family. We don't decide not to be there for our kids or our spouses. But what I find are the biggest areas of possibility with macro level choices on the personal side, a lot of it is our level of commitment to certain things. So for example, deciding if you're going to be on a board, or deciding if you're going to be chair of a board, or even choices around your kids' activities. It's great for your children to be involved in different activities, but how many activities are they involved in at once and how many times a week? I see in certain families, I can think of one coaching client where they have 4 children, and they have 2 daughters that were on multiple competitive soccer teams at the same time, and it was kind of driving the family crazy. So even making those choices okay, you love soccer, we want you to play soccer, but maybe you're on one team at a time instead of 2 teams, that sort of thing.
So when you are seeing folks at that macro level start going, okay, let me see whether I need to make a career shift or a business model shift, or I need to be more aware of like my personal things, you then move to the micro level. Now, one of the things that I've heard many times from whether it's me talking to friends or even me complaining about things is that I go, well, you know what? On the micro level, I got to do these coaching calls, I got to wash my dishes, I got to do these emails, I got to do. So I would love to free up my time, but I have to deliver on my responsibilities, but it feels like the responsibilities never end. And I think it was my wife who said to me jokingly, adulting is moving from one responsibility to the next and then falling asleep, you know? Um, so how do you help someone to overcome that overwhelm and then create that plan to take action?
Right, right. Well, and I mean, I agree. You have a very wise wife. It's not that there's really, I hate to break it to you, it's not that there's an end to responsibility, but what is in our control are the expectations we set of ourselves each day, and also our decisions to make space for time that's refreshing. Who says you have to wait to relax until all the potential responsibilities are done? Like, there absolutely can be times of refreshing each day. So on a micro level, what this looks like is, number one, I'm a big advocate of weekly and daily planning. So weekly planning is, like it sounds, very creatively named. Each week looking over what's coming up. So some people like to do this on a Friday afternoon. Other people like to do it maybe on a Sunday night. Other people maybe it's a Monday morning. And you're really looking over your schedule and saying, okay, what's the lay of the land? When do I have meetings? When do I have, other responsibilities that need to get done? Are there any big projects that I have coming up I need to set aside time for? So, for example, for you, like if you had a new speech you were developing or something like that. And what you do during your weekly planning, and I personally do this just right in my Google Calendar, is that if I have big projects that I need to get done, I'm putting in times during the week when I hypothesize that those will happen. I'm making sure I'm clear on all my appointments. And if I know that there's personal things coming up, like a birthday party over the weekend, in some time for that in the evening, like time to go shopping for a card or a gift or that sort of thing. And then on a daily basis, you want to do what I call daily planning, again, very creatively named. And it's where you're looking over the terrain of your day and assessing whether those priorities you had put in your calendar are still your priorities and starting to move through them. I personally like to do my daily plan in paper form. It's not required. I know plenty of people will do this on their electronic calendar, but I will literally take what I wrote on my Google Calendar and write it out on a quarter sheet of paper. So my appointment with you today was on there, answering my email in the morning was on there, my other coaching calls, all of that. And then throughout the day, I'm moving through that list as best I can. Does that mean that everything goes perfectly and according to schedule? Absolutely not. Like, I expect that things might take longer, might not get done, all of that. But what it does mean is that when I start my day, I'm very clear on what my priorities are. If it's not on my calendar, or if it's not, on the sheet of paper that I wrote down, I very seriously assess whether or not it's something that I will get done that day, or if it's something that needs to be either not done or moved to a different day or time. And why this is important is that it puts me in a proactive position where I'm not just reacting or responding to everything that comes in my email. I know what I want to accomplish that day. I'm doing my best to get that done and putting everything else in its place as the day goes along. So that's the overall kind of how you organize your day. And then in terms of feeling like you have a break, you have to schedule that too. Like as an adult or as a parent or whatever, you have to at a certain point just be like, you know what, after 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock or whatever it is, I don't care if there's more responsibilities. I'm sitting on the couch or I'm, talking to a friend or I'm going to work out. And you've got to set some parameters and boundaries around how much you're willing to give so that you have time for rest and you have time for downtime, because we're made for that. We're not meant to be going 24/7.
And that's something that I've admired about you, and I wonder about. So I want to dive deep into it. What I admire about you is, when you say like, I'm done at 5, you're done at 5. It's not like, well, could we meet at 5:30 or something? It's like you've set these boundaries and I've seen you clearly enforce them. My question about that enforcement of boundaries is, let's say you have I don't know, a launch you're working on, right? Like you're going like, hey, I'm helping launch a business idea or some sort that's like crazy time intensive. In those crazy time intensive times, when your like shut off time hits with 6 or 7 or whatever you might have chosen it to be, but like there's so much to get done, are you still shutting down and saying, this is what I decided because it's part of the bigger picture? Or do you push it back? Like, how do you deal with those intense moments where it feels like stopping feels like death?
Right. Yeah, no, great question. And I think like one of the nuances here, and this is something that I cover actually in my first book, The 3 Secrets to Effective Time Investment, is that there's also certain seasons. So there's our lifestyle, our general priorities and values, which I think typically are pretty stable. Unless we have some transformation, which of course we can, but we've got our general life values. And I would say, for example, my life values for the last over 8.5 years have been unchanged in terms of wanting to have a balanced life, wanting to be able to have time for friends, family, all that. But that doesn't mean that there aren't certain seasons where I intentionally choose for things to be different. But the difference is that those don't just happen to me. I decide it's okay with me. So, for example, with Divine Time Management, my new book, I still definitely desire to work 40 to 45 hours a week as a general life rule and lifestyle. With my book coming out, though, very, very soon, I have chosen during these 3 months leading up to the book launch that I'm okay with having a different standard in terms of how much I work during a specific time. So I absolutely have worked more than 40 to 45 hours a week. I have certain nights during the week where I do work later than 6. 6 is my typical cutoff time. And I've even worked Saturdays, which is something that I really do not prefer to do as a general rule. But for this specific 3 months, I've chosen, because I believe this is a high value investment of my time, to have it be that way. You better believe, though, after November 14th, I've already started to plan out the taper down. I'm like, there'll be no working on Saturdays. And by, within a few weeks to a month, I expect to be back down to my 40 to 45 hours a week and to have the more normal schedule. And so that's how I approach it. Is that the only way to approach it? No, that's what I choose to do. And I think the only thing you have to be careful of is, for me, a book only comes out every few years. So I can do something like amp it up for 3 months and then go back to my relatively normal schedule and know I'll be okay. If you do a launch like every 3 months, you're always crazy, well, then you need to, switch around your lifestyle. But yeah, so basically I choose to make exceptions to the rules when I believe it's the highest good, but I'm very intentional about that so that it's not a violation of self or like a violation of what I believe my principles to be around time.
Yeah, and that concept of seasons is so important, and I'm glad you touched upon that. I want to talk about, like, because you're in a season right now where you have your new book, Divine Time Management, that's coming out November 14th. So you're in a season where, all of this work and all of this effort is being put into it. And I want to talk about the book in a second. And before I do, the question I wanted to ask you is, how do you get the person who feels like they're always in a, like, there was like, well, that's easy for you to say, Elizabeth, that you have seasons. My whole life is winter. I'm stuck in Game of Thrones. So what are some strategies we can use to actually practically separate ourselves from being in this never-ending winter season, or whatever is the grind season, whatever that is?
Exactly. Yeah, no, great question. So there's a concept actually called the unschedule, and I believe it's from a book called The Now Habit. But regardless of the book, it's something called the unschedule. And in those cases where you just feel like life is always relentless, you have to, like I was talking about before, you have to schedule in downtime and you have to schedule limits. For example, I have multiple clients who, prior to working with me, very much were in that, like, it's always the winter season, it's always crazy, there's always something. And just some simple tweaks to their rules for themselves have helped them calm down and set better boundaries. So for example, a lot of them have set up basically a no technology after this time. So what I mean by that is maybe they decide that it's after 7 o'clock or after 9 o'clock. They're not allowed to be on their phones. They're not allowed to be on their computers. It doesn't matter how much crazy is going on. They're not dealing with it till the next morning. And that has been such a sanity saver for them. Also help them to actually sleep at night versus getting all amped up. Another key thing you can do if you feel like your life is just always crazy is, I know people vary a lot in terms of whether they're morning people, but I have found that for coaching clients, particularly if they have children, that if they can get up a little earlier in the morning and have some downtime either alone or with their spouse where they can think, they can get centered, they can maybe exercise, it just radically transforms their day. Just even having an hour just to themselves where they feel like they can press pause on life and get to a more centered place. And then finally, and this ties into my new book, Divine Time Management, and I know you would understand this very well, there's a biblical concept of having a Sabbath. So having a day each week that you set aside not to work. And this is something even people that aren't religious at all, I've seen incorporate into their lives with really positive effects. And one thing I've discovered, like especially during this time when things are a lot more busy than usual with my launch, is that when I take a Sabbath, when I take a day off and I step away from all the work, all the crazy, no matter how much I feel like, oh my gosh, there's so much I should be doing, all of a sudden my perspective shifts. And all these things I'm like, thought were such a big deal and that I had to get done. Life was crazy. I'm like, what was I so worried about? So if you can take a day a week to just not work, and we don't need, I don't think we have to be really legalistic about it, but I would say just, step away from your business, step away from your job. I think you'll actually find that the world doesn't come to an end, and you'll get out of that sense of, oh, it's always the winter season, I never have a break, and feeling all sorry for yourself.
Yeah, and I can't stress what you're saying enough because I didn't always not work on Saturdays. So, for my personal choice, I don't work on Saturdays. That's my Sabbath. And literally, literally, I don't use a screen. So I don't watch TV. I don't use the internet. I don't use a phone. And I didn't always do that. And when I first started doing it, I was like, I'm wasting a day. The world's going to get a jump on me. There's going to be a guy who's outworking me right now because he's got 7 days and I got 6. And I think what you said, you don't get it until you experience it. The world doesn't end. You still get things done. You're actually more recharged and more refreshed. And you connect to the humanity of the world when you're not constantly in the go. So having that day, I'm a huge advocate of it. Regardless of, spiritual, religious beliefs, if you give yourself a day just to connect with your family and there's not a screen in between you two, or you're not just talking about the business deal, you create a boundary that actually I think makes I've actually been more productive, and I feel like I've gotten more done since I've infused it.
Mm-hmm.
And now tell me more about these kind of almost spiritual tenets that you are delving into with Divine Time Management, the new book you have coming out.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. And I just love what you said about the Sabbath. It's so true. I love the Sabbath, and this fall with my book, I was a lot more tempted than usual to break it, because you have so much going out, and I think particularly when you're doing a faith-based book, you can be like, well, God, I'm being so holy. Look at I'm helping you, and I really felt like God told me, He was like, Elizabeth, how can you say you trust me if you can't give me your time? If you can't take a day for me, a day to rest and really get life in perspective. So at the core of my new book, which I'm really excited to talk to you about, it's Divine Time Management, The Joy of Trusting God's Loving Plans for You. And it is a real shift. You've known me for a super long time, and my first 2 books were very much about helping type B people be more type A. So a lot of stuff we were talking about, get clear on your priorities, plan your day, set realistic expectations, work on your routines, all that awesome stuff, which I still think is awesome. I still help people with, and I'm so happy to do it. But divine time management is something that is helping actually type A people chill out. So I had to change a lot in the process of writing this book. And it was so humbling because I realized that I very much, through my time management techniques and strategies and all that, had really been trying to create a universe where I was at the center of it. So it was about Elizabeth. So what are Elizabeth's priorities? What does she want for her life? How can she have the life she wants? Instead of having the idea that life isn't really about me. It's not supposed to be a self-centered universe. And I come from a Christian faith perspective. And so from that perspective, and you being Jewish, from your perspective, God is supposed to be at the center of our universe, and understanding that our lives aren't our own and that we're really part of a bigger picture. And so the first part of my book, which I'll just share with you and then I'll stop so you can comment, is about trusting God at the center of our time management. And why this is important is, part of it's from this theoretical framework. So if you are someone of faith, we're not supposed to be God. There is a God and we're not Him. But the second part of it that I think is really relevant to everyone is that when we feel like we're the center of our universe, that somehow we're the gods of our lives, and that it all depends on our work and it all depends on our strategies, we're putting an enormous amount of pressure on ourselves that we were never meant to carry. Because the truth is, deep down, all of us, doesn't matter if you have a faith background or not, know that there's so many things in life we can't control. We may do all the right things with our time or all the right things with our business and have things explode in a bad way, not work out. Or we could honestly not do all the right things and things could go great. And there's also people in our lives that may or may not do what we hope they'll do. And there's so many limitations we have. And I have really found, at least for me, from a faith perspective, that when I switch my focus away from my trust, my security, my safety, being in myself and my own plans, to my trust, security, and safety being in the fact that I believe that there is a God and that He loves me and has things covered, I experience so much more peace, so much more joy, and so much less stress about life in general.
Yeah, and there's a lot to the idea of focus, and I just couldn't agree more with that idea that when our world is as big as us, when our service is as no bigger than the diameter of our bodies, that's when we fail in life, because we're just trying to say, how do I get something? How do I get it? But when you really do put your thoughts and your process to the actions you take to being of service to the greater good, of doing something much bigger, you have to find something that you can hold on to. For me, it's been one of the things that I think has given me an advantage, because I'm constantly saying, how do I serve God in a bigger way? How do I serve? How do I serve? And what's interesting about that is that even though I may not be, a rabbi or a religious figure or anything of that nature, I feel the more people I help, the more I'm doing God's work. And that, it just happened to work really well for me. And I encourage people to find what's going to allow you to dig deep inside yourself and say, this is going to make me more of service to others. This is going to make me say, how do I impact more people? Not solely because if I impact more people, I'm going to make more money, which is a very common trap people get into, that the service of others solely is to make money. But it's that very gray borderline of, let me help a lot of people so that the byproduct is that my success, my happiness, my wealth grows. But my initial service is in, my fellow man and serving a greater, bigger cause. And when you find you're working with people, do you ever find that people are resistant to seeing how they may be self-serving? Because I think many people would be like, oh yeah, no, I care about everyone else. I totally do. But when you look at their actions, it doesn't necessarily match up. Do people usually get this concept, or is it something that, or something you can take people through to help them get? How do you get into that bigger level of service and move a little bit past just serving yourself?
Yeah, great question. And I love what you said about really looking to serve, because if our hearts are looking to serve, if our motivation is service, what that means is that the fuel behind everything we do is love. And no matter how people respond to us, we're delighted. We're like, because we were like, our fuel was love. What we wanted was love. When we're doing things because we want a certain reaction or response or money or whatever from someone, our fuel is fear. And so if we don't get whatever it is we thought we wanted, we're not going to feel great. So what you said is great. And God's really been challenging me, like, do everything from love. So in terms of helping people with this process, what I have found is that it's something that people need to understand at a heart level. It's not necessarily something that they can just understand at an intellectual level. And I feel like when people get in one of two situations, they can start to embrace this at a heart level in terms of looking at life from a place of true service. So one of the situations they get in, which is often the coaching clients that come to me, is they get totally overwhelmed and they realize they cannot do life on their own. And so they don't have any option other than to kind of surrender to the fact that they can't handle it all. They need help. And if they are trying to handle everything on their own and do everything for themselves, that they're going to crack. The second thing in terms of this shift is that I find what helps people get to this place of like doing things from service and love versus from self-centeredness is that they recognize that doing things from self-centeredness leads to self-sabotage, because they get so paranoid. We all get paranoid. If we're like, I remember something you said a long time ago, Arel. You said, I would like the audience to like me, but I don't need them to like me. I mean, you said this years ago and I still remember it. You're like, I would like the audience to like me, but I don't need them to like me. So you're doing it from service. You're showing up as your authentic self. You're in an okay place. And my time management coaching clients will come to me and sometimes they'll be paralyzed. They'll like be so worried about work, so worried about moving ahead on a project, so worried about whatever. And I'll tell them, I'm like, well, I understand you can stay there. If you want to be free, you have to stop worrying about what other people are thinking of you or how they're going to react or respond, and focus on serving them and doing your best. And when your eyes get off of yourself and your own insecurity onto helping others, you're going to be free. And so that's when they can make that shift and they recognize how much easier life is, how much more productive they are. And it's like, they end up doing things from a place of service because it's honestly in their own best interest not to be freaked out.
Yeah. I was once told that, man plans and God laughs,
Right.
we do everything we can, but ultimately, I can't, what's cool about the belief too, and the freedom that I think comes in, it's not just in time management. Like, I'll give an example. In sales, for example, let's say I'm on the phone with a client. Like, it's my job to say all the things that I want to say, ask all the questions I want to ask. But ultimately, if the client decides to work with me or not, like, that's totally out of my control, right? Like, I know it, and it feels counterproductive, but like, my job is to do everything I'm supposed to do, and that's it. And then I leave it all up to God. I go, look, if they say yes or they say no, to me, it doesn't crush me as much, because I'm like, well, this is part of a bigger plan. This is part of something that I don't understand. So there's a level of stress that gets removed when you can just go,
Absolutely.
I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, well, I know it's part of something, bigger. And it's very difficult. And I wish I had an answer, because sometimes people will say to me, like, Aurel, well, how do you explain, like, the mass shooting or something that just happened in Texas? And, the truth is, I will never be someone to say, like, I know why these bad things happen, but the only thing I can hold on to is, well, what's the bigger plan? What can happen from it? And it's hurtful to think that anyone has to be hurt or die. But I remember there's this great program called Rachel's Challenge, which I really admire. And there was a young girl who was killed during the Columbine shooting. And it's a horrific tragedy, and I can't explain why that happened. I'm not saying it was good that it happened, but what her family did is they created this entire organization that has done, I don't even know, tens of thousands probably of presentations, and worked with tens of thousands of schools to cut down on bullying and aware people about compassion and love. And Rachel was the name of the girl. And when you hear the people her family who founded it, you hear them talk about how her energy is helping to impact so many. So it's kind of trusting something bigger. And,
Totally.
when you look at that concept of going into, allowing yourself to, like, feel it in your heart, as you mentioned, and kind of have that trust, regardless of what our particular vehicle of faith or where we get to that destination, but we have to bring it to our heart. What do you see helps people get it in their heart, or what helped you get it in your heart?
Right. Yeah. Great question. And gosh, I got tears in my eyes when you were talking about the tragedies, and just big segue, and then I'll do what brings it into your heart. I've just been praying from the tragedy that we just saw happen in Texas, just that it will lead to, better controls, like the Air Force or the military recording what's going on and all of that, so that, good can come from it no matter what. But going back to your question about what helps you to get things in your heart, in the second part of my book, I talk about love for your true identity versus living out of false identities. And false identities can be so many different things. But in my book, I talk about positions, molds, labels, possessions, and generational patterns. And I talk about some of my own struggles with living out of false identities. So this idea that I had to be a great student, like a really good student, or I needed to be great at my business, or I needed to be always positive or always happy, or any of those things. And how this is relevant to your question is that when we live out of false identities, we're completely disconnected from our hearts. We're not aware of who we truly are. We're not aware of what we really think. We're not aware of our feelings, and we, in a desperate attempt to feel safe and to control our lives, we turn to all these methods. So we turn to maybe it's that we're crazy good at time management, or we work like crazy and we never stop working, or we try to be the most social person ever and have everyone like us, or we work out and we're like really good at athletics, but like so much so that we're hurting our body or something like that. And all of these different things are ways in which we keep ourselves disconnected from our heart, and we aren't really aware of what we need or what we don't need, or what works for us or what doesn't work for us. And so I really feel like peeling away the false identities and this false sense of security that we put in things that aren't real security is the way that we get connected to our heart. And I talk about this in the book about how to identify those false identities and how to start pulling them away. But to make a long story short, when you get more and more to your true self and you're able to accept who you are and accept that you are inadequate, you can actually start to love yourself for who you really are. You can actually love other people for who they really are. You can relax. You can do your work from a place of joy. You can actually be in a place where you can connect with your faith center, whatever that looks like, and live a life of real peace where you're not trying to create safety and security by your own effort, but you're allowing yourself to relax into it. And also in the very end of my book, chapter 8, I talk a lot about self-care from a place of self-love and self-compassion and self-acceptance. And in that section, I have a quote from a book called The New Codependency, and it talks about loving yourself for your weaknesses and your faults and your failings, and appreciating that your journey, your story, even the things that you may see as broken or wrong about you are actually the things that make you most precious and that make your life valuable and connect you with all of humanity. And so I think it's really when we're willing to let go of all these facades of what we feel we should be or what we have to have in our life and really let ourselves connect with our heart center and our faith center, that's where our real power, our real peace, and our real joy in our life can really come forth.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying just really epitomizes, in my mind, the idea of the growth mindset that, we're not perfect right now, but we can get better versus that feeling of I need to be perfect right now. A very fixed,
Right.
like I need it right now. And if
Right.
I'm not that right now, I'm less than, or, I should have more money saved, or I should be at a higher status symbol. And then what happens is that crushes our soul, because whenever we have those thoughts, we're then fixed in our way of being, and our fixed way of being isn't up to par, then we're sad. Whereas if we say, look, I'm totally not perfect, I'm totally not going to be the greatest at everything yet, but I can get better, and I can kind of trust in that is crucial. And, we've talked a little bit in reference about your book that's coming out, Divine Time Management, that's coming out November 14th. So depending upon when you're listening to it, you can either pre-order it now, or you can order it if you're listening to this after the 14th. But just kind of I know you've touched on it, but you give a little bit more about the book. And I know you're also doing some cool giveaways for folks who get on the pre-order. So tell us about that as well.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. So Divine Time Management, like I said, is my third book. It's on a spiritual approach, a faith-based approach to time management. So if you liked what you heard about life not being all about you, this is for you. Or maybe if you didn't like what you heard, but you know that you need to grow in this area, this might also be for you. So what you'll discover in there is I've got 3 sections. One is on trusting God at the center. The second is on love for your true identity. And the third is on alignment with God. And so as it sounds, it's very spiritual. I am Christian, so it's from a Christian perspective. So just so you're aware of that, of course, anyone is welcome to read or listen, but that's kind of the paradigm I'm coming from. And it's really a sharing of my heart. So there's a lot of personal stories in there. If you have any worries that somehow you're not perfect enough, don't worry. There's all these stories of me crying in the book, and you'll find out that you're probably better than I am in a lot of areas. And there's also just a lot of practical exercises in terms of how do we let go? Like, what does it look like to have more trust in God? Or what does it look like to identify my false identities and then start to figure out, who am I really? Like, how was I created? What really resonates with me? And then also the third section on alignment with God is all about how do we live a life of love? because I really believe that God has called us to a life of love. And so often we get so distracted by getting tasks done, we've completely forget that that's the main goal of our lives. And yeah, so that's the book. And did you want to interject there for a sec?
No, I was just going to say, yeah. No, I was just going to say, yeah, and you're going to be giving out, you got some cool stuff, so I just want to make sure you mention the cool stuff. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, and so then in terms of the pre-order bonus, for people who order by November 14th, if you go to divinetimebook.com, again, that's divinetimebook.com, you have the opportunity to receive a few different things. So one is the opportunity to sign up for a free 3-part live class with me about the book. So it is live, it is free, and it's really an opportunity for you to not only buy my book, but actually read it. I don't want this to just be added to this stack of like dead books that never get read in your house. So if you go to divinetimebook.com, you can sign up for that. It'll be a chance to ask questions, interact with others, go deeper into the material with me in the process. You'll also have a chance when you sign up for that to have the potential to win free signed copies of my book. And when you sign up, you'll also immediately receive just a prayer to help you have more peace and calm in your life. So that's, again, divinetimebook.com for orders by November 14th. And it's just how you can be completely supported and have the opportunity to interact live with me, as well as if you can't attend the class, there will be recordings that get sent out.
Awesome. Yeah. And I can't stress enough that the strategies work. If you like everything we say in this podcast, I say this over and over and over again, and this one absolutely is applicable. The information shared on this podcast, the information that Elizabeth shared with us, will not help you in any way whatsoever. The implementation of this information absolutely will transform your life. And I believe getting in control not only of your time, but getting in control of the way you feel about your time and the way you feel about overwhelm, and getting the opportunity to work with Elizabeth, honestly, it doesn't happen often, and it probably won't ever happen this cheap either by just a pre-order of a book.
You can pay $500 for this if you want to sign up.
Yeah, so getting a book and getting that is honestly, I'm speaking from experience. It's something I would highly encourage you to do. And Elizabeth, if people want to stay connected to you on social media or whatever is the best way to stay connected in all things, whether it's your blog, what's the best way to stay connected with you?
Yes, the best way to stay connected would be through my newsletter. So if you go to scheduleamakeover.com, again, that's scheduleamakeover.com, you can get all my latest info. And on social media, I'm Elizabeth Grace Saunders on LinkedIn. I'm your time management coach, if you do time coach, on Facebook. And then on Twitter, I'm Real Life E.
Very cool. And is there anything else you want to leave us with? And by the way, all this will be in the show notes if you're listening to this and you're like, oh no, I didn't write it down. Don't stop or pull over or hurt yourself if you're driving. Just, it'll be in the show notes.
No accident.
Yeah, you'll be good. But Elizabeth, thank you so much for pouring into us. Is there anything that you'd like to depart us with, or any idea? Or maybe, is there a question that maybe you wish people would ask more, that they don't ask enough, that you think has a big impact? You can go anywhere you want with it.
Right. Well, I would say I'm going to do real quick. I'm going to do 2. Number 1, if there was one thing I wanted people to know, and that I feel is really, I hope is communicated in the book, is that you're enough and you're loved right now. So often we do a whole bunch of stuff, try to be a whole bunch of things because we think we're not enough and we're not loved. And I just want everyone listening to this, even if you don't buy my book, you're enough and you're loved right now. You don't need to do anything to get that. It's already there. And then number 2, in terms of the question, I really think the essential question is, am I fueled by fear or am I fueled by love? And if you are fueled by love and service in whatever you're doing, you're going to live a phenomenal life.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for allowing us to have a glimpse into how to serve others, in how to understand the macro and micro levels of where our time is going, how to figure out how to schedule those times, how to put in things of unscheduling, how to understand what's important to us, how to let go of the things that we can't control, how to create boundaries so that we ourselves can be refreshed and really enjoy life. Because what's the point of just working all day and then dying, right? Like, we need to enjoy this precious thing called life that we all have, that no one gets out of alive. And you just opened up so much, and I know that from your first 2 books, this third one is going to be truly a incredible piece of work. So thank you for your contribution to our podcast, to the world, and to all of you out there listening. Remember, you are awesome. Psh.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast, The Art of Likeability, and reach out with any questions you have. Until next time, remember, my friend, you are awesome.